Welcome to Nomads with a Purpose. I'm Gabi.
I'm Isabelle.
I'm Danny.
So we've been living in an RV since, well, we're all different ages, but we've been living in an RV since I was 14, since you were 10, and since you were
14.
So we've been living in an RV for 6 years now, and we had the super unconventional lifestyle of being nomads, traveling the world, and living in an RV. And so we wanted to share some of the things, like the challenges and the things that nobody tells you about what it's like to live in an RV as a teenager. On top of that, living in an RV with teenagers is one of the biggest blockages.
Yeah. It's almost like a curse. People treat it like a black cat crossing the road when it comes to teens living in an RV. Like, oh, you don't do that. That's like
they're
a
delicate,
curse.
is what they would say.
Right,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't want to move into their RVs because they have teenage kids, and a lot of times teenage kids are sassy and they're like, "But I want to go to school, but what about my friends?" Well, we're here to share with you all the awesome things about living in an RV and all the struggles and how you can overcome them. So the first one we want to talk about is personal space, because a lot of people are like, I could never share a room with my siblings, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, so I mean, we had friends growing up, and even when we first started living in an RV, we had friends, and we'd be like so in shock when they're like, "Oh my gosh, you have your stuff in my room. How dare you?" And we're like, "Dude, I've been like sharing a bed with my brother for the last 3 weeks. So what are you talking about?" And so personal space is not something we easily come by, and it's something you easily get over. And it's kind of weird. Why do you think like teenagers treat personal space like it's such an issue? But for us, like, it wasn't that much of a thing to overcome.
So personal space really comes down to how close of a relationship you have with your family, right? Like, if you're irritated by your siblings and by your parents, then you don't want to be around them all the time. So first you might have to address like maybe you should try to like have a better relationship with your siblings, because we all love each other so much.
Yeah.
I mean, like, speaking as the most introverted and probably the one that you guys would say needs the most personal space.
Yeah.
You just take it where you can get it. And I mean, no teenager needs personal space every second of their day. Even ones like me just need a couple of hours, and if they really want it, they will find it. They don't have to be in the RV the entire day. Most people are not in their RVs the entire day. I think that's a big
right
one.
And truthfully, like, that's the thing, it's like your personal space just becomes the outdoors, not your own room. And so, the other things that we're going to talk about in this will be will play a role in that, because we're going to talk about like intrinsic motivation later on, but definitely.
Yeah, so like and personal space comes down to like the reason teens want so much personal space is, I mean, like, at first I wanted a lot of personal space because it was like, I was literally being just angsty, like, I want space, I don't like this. But then eventually you're just like, well, this is pretty awesome, and you find personal space and things to do outside of that.
So the second one is minimalism ain't too shabby. So we literally each, for 4 years of the time we lived in an RV, I think we each owned one box of clothes, and our box of clothes was about
like
that big, that deep, and that was all of the clothes we owned. And for some teenagers, that's just mind-boggling. How could you own so little clothes? But what is your clothes serving a purpose for? So truthfully, if you're spending your days outside traveling, in an RV park, maybe you can, when you're younger, you ride around the campground and then you go hiking. For us, our RV life has centered around outdoor-based activities. So truthfully, all we need is like active wear, like we're wearing right now.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is that RV life really shifts your perspective on what you need and what you don't need, especially as like a teen. You're like trying to be like, I believe in this. This is what I need. Like, stand in your beliefs. But then RV life changes that so much. And so when we moved into an RV, especially for the clothes realm, you're like, I really only need like 4 pairs of clothes. What I like do the same thing. I hike and I go to bed and then I get up and I climb again. So I really need like 2 outfits. And then it like weeds out what you need. It's minimalism. It's fine.
Right. And so you really, at first it's gonna be hard. Like, if you move into an RV with teenagers will be like, oh, but I want these things, and you have to downsize all your unnecessary necessities that you would call necessities but aren't really necessary. And at first it's because materialism at first plays a role in fulfilling you when you're like a young teenager. But as we get to the later things in this video, you discover a sense of fulfillment that isn't from external things. That's an inner sense of fulfillment. So that material things no longer fulfill that desire, that fulfillment.
that tank of fulfillment.
And I think a lot of people have those closets and garages full of stuff, and they've like never had to like actually deal with it. But I think if you found that you actually were committed to moving into like a small space, you go through that stuff, and like 99% of that stuff you probably really don't need. I mean, like we had closets full of junk before we moved into an RV, and then you just get rid of them, and then you miss them for a week, and then you're like, on with your life.
You like, when we first went to an RV, I was 14, and I remember when downsizing my room and thinking, one, like, wow, I have so many little things that I don't use, so many like nail polishes and like little knick-knack things. Like, why do I still have this? And so you just clear that out, and it makes space for creativity and intrinsic motivation, which we're about to talk about.
Yeah. A last note, I mean, like, on minimalism is that in a way, through living RV life, it becomes addictive, and then you slowly realize, like, wow, I need so little to be happy.
Addicted to getting rid of things.
You become addicted to get rid of things because, like, well, basically, because, like, RV life teaches you, like, really what you need, and minimalism was, like, such a big one.
So the next one is sharing is caring, and this one's obviously...
Yeah, here, do you need my jacket? You look cold. You know, we just share.
When you downsize, you have so little things, and you're all sharing one space. You have to share everything. You share bedrooms. You share bathrooms.
Closets.
You share closets. You share clothes sometimes.
I mean, like, now we're traveling a little more.
Don't share
Yeah, that's where we draw the line. We draw the line there. We are starting, like, living in a bigger RV now, more on and off. But for the majority, we've been living in a 30-foot Class C. And there's 7 of us, in case you don't know, sharing one bathroom. Now, for most teens, any friends I had, like, would lose their mind having to share a bathroom with their siblings. And I'm like, dude, I'm sharing it with, like, 7 grown people. Get over it.
So before, we now live in a 40-foot fifth wheel. But before that, we lived in a 30-foot Class C RV for 4 years, and we shared one bathroom in that, and it would take at least an hour for everyone to get ready for bed.
Yeah. And so, like, we'd be all in a line,
go.
Yeah, we'd just all be in a line, like, hurry up! Like, somehow our youngest takes the longest. The youngest, our youngest sibling, she's like, I need to do my skincare routine.
Fortunately, none of us girls were obsessed with our makeup or anything, so that speeds up the process. But I know for most people, they'd be like, you know, the running joke that girls take forever in the bathroom. Well, that's not us.
Not to mention, for a long time too, we didn't have running water or showers. So it's like, they're not even counting showers. Side note. But, like, that really breaks down the time. But also, like, sharing is caring also applies to everything else. Like,
it applies to, I mean, in a broad sense, it's like sharing space in your life to be caring for the people around you, don't you think? It's more of an attitude towards everything around you. It's not just like, I want to share my things with you. It's like, I want to share my energy with you. I want to contribute to my siblings, my family, so I can help out in the best way possible.
And so it's that idea of ownership. Like, this thing is owned by me, and I own it because it is mine and I deserve it. So it kind of brings you down a notch, and when you realize that you are, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, a team player.
Yeah, it's like you switch from, like, oh, I'm, like, in this family mindset who, like, no one's working for me, to, like, being a part of the flow of energy.
Yeah. So the big question people always have is, what about school? You know, every teenager always says, but I want to go to high school. Maybe they start as RV living and they're like, oh, but I want to go to high school, so the families quit RV living. Or they don't, because their kids want to stay in high school, and they don't move into an RV. So what do you do for school? So the big thing is, the concern with school for most teenagers isn't actually obviously the school part. Nobody's concerned, like, how am I going to get my education? It's like, we have this stigma, and our society has, like, cultivated our programming as young kids to, like, think that high school is so important, and it's where I'm going to have so much of my life is going to be in high school. Well, the truth is, it's not, and life exists outside of the school system and outside of a high school. And it turns out that high school actually is very possible to be a more negative influence than a positive influence. So personally, do you have something that you want to say?
Well, I was gonna say that, like, I think the most intimidating thing is, like, the idea of, like, well, if they're not in the school, I have to teach them. I don't know, feel, you know, maybe, like, I can teach them all. You just give them some classes, like, online or homeschool.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that people don't realize with RV life in itself is a teacher, and RV life has taught me, like, way more skills than I think I was learning any time before I lived in an RV. I mean, it teaches you, one, like social skills in general. You're in these new places traveling and you're like, well, I have to figure out how to communicate, and just so many more life skills that you use in life.
Plus, and I wrote a blog on 10 reasons people don't full-time travel with teens, which is slightly different, but it's the same concept really. And for some reason, a lot of people have this idea that they want their teenagers to be surrounded by other people their age, like other peers. Like it's bad for them to not be surrounded by other people their age. Well, the truth is, like, why isn't it a bad thing to be surrounded by mature adults who are teaching you positive traits of, you know, of successful adults and having that influence on you? Because like teenagers can, like I said, it can be a negative influence. Like, sure, you know, you can have some good friendships that you find through school, but a lot of times you're learning the idea that you need to be accepted, you need to fit in, you need to change yourself to be accepted into friend groups, and you just need to do what makes you more likable.
I mean, yeah, you nailed it right there. But I remember, especially for me, she's totally right about adults and stuff, is because throughout my travels, we didn't really interact with other people our age. We were never at a campground and saw other teenagers, but we did meet a lot of interesting adults, and in a way that helps you as you're like going through this age, growing up, because you're seeing on a mature level. And so it kind of whereas like for peers, you're in a more of a mindset of, oh, what are other people thinking of me? Like they can have that negative influence, and how are we all as peers going to be in accordance to each other in the future? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Definitely.
And instead, it's like when you're surrounded by adults, they're like have this different mindset and different energy that you're
get
receiving.
Out of comparison and more of what you're striving for. Like, oh
exactly.
wow, this is what can I grow into that this person reflects.
She said it in a very.
And what you were talking about with actual schooling. So there's a couple things. Like, first of all, you can do like, oh, you could just get your kid in online school. That's easy. It's like, it's the easiest option, but it's also like the most similar to the school system. Now, like, second, you can learn how to homeschool your kids. And my mom does courses on this, on how you can homeschool your kids and teenagers. And it's not as hard as you think. And you can actually set your kids up to be more successful. And I can say that because all three of us are entrepreneurs and we pretty much love our life, which I think most people can't say at our age. And so there's that option. And then leading on to that one is that 3. I think high school is probably the best opportunity in a kid's life to learn how to become an entrepreneur. And I know some people like, well, why would I want my kid to be an entrepreneur? Well, being an entrepreneur gives you so many options in life. And even if your child at one point decides like, well, I don't want to be an entrepreneur, and says, I want to go to college to get this job, the skills of learning to be an entrepreneur are skills that will cross over to all aspects of life to allow your kids to
be set up for success.
Be set up for success, to overcome obstacles more easily.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else?
I had something like 5 minutes ago. I can't remember what I was gonna say 5 minutes ago. So
what are we at? Number 4? Fourth thing.
5?
4, 5. Fifth. Fifth thing. Number 5.
Okay.
Friends come and go. I'm like, the most common thing anytime we meet other parents traveling, or they're like, oh my gosh, you're a teenager? What about friends? Like, they're horrified.
We're gonna make a whole video on this later, but like for now, it's because this is the first question people ask you, not about school, but about friends.
Yeah, usually.
What about friends?
I think admittedly, like deep down, even though adults don't want to admit it, they don't really think the public school system is all that impressive.
Yes. Yeah. Especially in certain states. Okay, anyway.
But anyway, like friends, like what is the thing behind friends? Do we have friends traveling? The easy answer is not really. But we do have friends because you become friends with your siblings.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have 4 friends, and you've got 4 friends, and you've got 4 friends.
She probably has 5 friends. She's the social butterfly. Okay, but I think the real thing here is that, okay, when you first move into an RV, and let's assume that you're moving into an RV to travel a little bit and not to be completely stationary, because if you're fully stationary, then nothing really changes, especially if you continue to send your kids to school. But let's assume you're traveling. At most teenagers, because we have met a couple other teenagers who have either traveled or lived in an RV, and the common beginning is that everyone starts with, oh, my old friends, or the friends I met through whatever sports or school from when I was younger. I'll stay in touch with them, and it's no big deal. We'll just stay friends, and I'll still have friends as we travel. Well, the truth is, like, living a lifestyle like this, it seems like just a lifestyle, but a lifestyle completely changes your inner value system and when your value systems change, well, friendships are built off of common
Yeah.
value systems. So if you have different values than what your old friends do, then you no longer, it's not that you don't get along with them on the surface level. You're probably still a nice person. At least for us, it was like that. Like, you could get along with them, but you no longer had much common ground.
Yeah, there's no connection. I mean, for all our friends in the past, it was the exact thing you're saying, is that we were like, oh, we'll stay in touch with them, and slowly, like, we're staying in touch, and there's more and more effort being put in, and there's this, like, disconnect, like, oh, you're changing. Like, I don't really understand. There's not much of a common ground anymore. I talk about the gossip at school, and we're like,
Right.
I just hiked a mountain. I don't.
Especially when we talked about if you're spending a lot of time around other, like, mature adults or adults from, like, you know, we meet people from lots of different countries because other than RV living, we also travel to 26 different countries. And so when you're surrounded by that and your maturity level grows, you just don't see eye to eye, and not like in a conflict way, just like, I don't know
Yeah.
how this friendship serves anymore.
I mean, but in a way, I count that as a win, because you're evolving. RV life evolves you in your mindset to such a level that you're coming more connected to your true self, but we'll get to that later. That it's like, oh no, I don't get along with these people anymore, but there's still connection. And that's the thing, is that when people ask, oh, what about friends, is that in a way, the society teen version of what people believe friends are is overrated, and that connection with other people is something that is underrated, because as you travel, you're meeting so many different people that you have a form of small friendships everywhere you go.
That's very true. And then, like, on the basic level, we say friends come and go because literally friends come and go, in that just the fact that you might go on trips often and you spend more time away from your friends often have this feeling of like you slighted them in a way because you're not around them all the time, which is understandable, because if you put yourself in the shoes of that person and your friend's away from you all the time, then comes back and they just did all these cool things and they're just stuck in the school system, well, it's hard to stay friends.
Yeah, and then that's when you meet, especially for us in our travels, then you meet the true friends who understand that and still agree with you on that. I mean, we've met a few people who are like, yep, you're gonna, like, you might come back tomorrow, you might come back in a month, who knows, we'll see you then, and we still love you. And that's when we get into our next one, which is
the rule of 5. Do you want to explain the rule of 5?
The rule of 5 is a sacred rule among the nomads with a purpose. It explains that you must be ready to go anywhere in either 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, or 5 weeks. And sometimes
or 5 months.
Even 5 months.
Or 5
we've
years.
had 5 years too. So that's the rule of 5, is that what we've learned through our travels, especially, I mean, with so many different people for us living in a family of 7, and that's a lot of people for, like, parents have to juggle. And so it's like, we might be leaving to go hike or go do this, and it's like hard to get the message around. So it's just like, be ready, and you have to listen by the rule of 5. We might leave in 5 minutes to go hike. We might leave in 5 hours. We might change our mind and leave in 5 weeks. All right.
Yeah, I'd say this one isn't totally exclusive to RV living, because
Yeah.
I know people who are like this, who don't live in RVs, and there's actually a lot of people who live in RVs who don't do this. This is kind of just
a personal
This is
one.
a family personal thing, and
Yeah.
other families might have this.
But it plays a huge influence on growing up as a sorry.
You just interrupted him? Is that what
I
happened?
think that's what happened.
I just said so it's okay. You finish your thought first.
But living the rule of 5 has really changed us as, I think, teens, because it teaches you, like, the most important skill, which is adaptability.
I mean, if you think about it, like, what is the meaning behind the skill of adaptability? Well, when you become an adult, which we technically are now, she's still a kid, like, life doesn't always go as planned, and the ability to adapt and overcome and change routes as fast as you can is going to help you get over those roadblocks faster and, like, move on to the next thing and move into this next evolution of yourself faster. And adaptability is something that, like, a lot of times we don't see the practical application of it, but it's super practical, and it's going to cross over to all aspects.
And that, like, it also teaches with the rule of 5 not only adaptability but detachment, especially with, like, how you said, like, changing who you are. Like, oh yep, we're moving to this new thing, I'm just gonna go with it and enjoy it, rather than being stubborn and being like, but I want this is not fair.
Well, it's definitely one of those rules that, like, the rule of 5 will definitely only apply, like, if you just stay where you are but you live in a motorhome, it's not going to be really affected. And it also is dependent on the parents on whether or not you go by the
Go
rule
by
of
the rule of
5.
five.
Because
Yeah.
some parents,
Yeah.
I think, who travel don't have that. They're like,
Yeah.
no, I planned all of my travels out for the next 6
Yeah.
months.
And you know, like what you were just saying, how the rule of 5 applies on like a broader level. I can say personally that like this year, or at least last year, 2020, we had to go from our regular routine of RV life where we would spend like a month in San Diego so that my dad could work, and then we would go travel and for a long time, and then we'd come back in the winter time sometime, usually, and that totally changed in 2020 because of all the COVID stuff, and it was really hard for me to adapt to that major life difference, because I was like, oh, I loved the way my life was, but it was a perfect representation of what the rule of 5 taught me. It's like, you can't go back and change things, but you can adapt and evolve into this new role.
Yeah, it's like that. There's a meme. It's like improvise, adapt, overcome.
This
You
is
gotta
Will's
live by
favorite meme. Okay.
Okay.
We should just put it right there.
that. Yeah, it's right there.
It's right over my face.
Or maybe
isn't
it's
it?
over there.
You can put it over my
Okay.
head.
Okay, number 7, I think we're on.
6, 7? Yeah.
7.
Yes, 7.
Intrinsic
You
motivation.
can count.
A big one, I feel like, when you first start off RV life and you're still in that, or for me at least, I was in that teen mindset of like, oh, I'm doing this for other people. How are other people seeing me? I'm going to do this because I want to. It's all based on how you think your peers are going to see
It's
you.
all about validation. I mean, the mind of a teenager is like, how can I be validated, accepted? How can I be validated, accepted, and seen as like worthy and like enough for the world?
Yeah, and then instead, RV life, because one, you're kind of detached from all your peers, it teaches you to have intrinsic motivation and be motivated for something that you desire.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember when I was probably 14 and we just started, and I was told that I had 2 options. I could either do the normal 8 hours of school a day, or I could do 2 hours of school a day, but then I had to fill the rest of my time with self-assigned schoolwork. So basically, basically most of your life becomes
Intrinsically
yeah,
driven.
intrinsic. Like, what do I want out of myself?
Right.
Yeah.
You just have so much spare time. And like my personal example would be, so we moved in when I was 14, and so I was a freshman in high school when we moved in, and obviously I was homeschooled. The first year, I remember we did a lot of regular school because we were both in high school at the time. We're only a year apart, so we kind of just did like the same school. When I was 15, the following year, a year after RV living, we decided we were gonna go to Europe and live and travel in an RV for 6 months. So we were like, oh, we just want to like enjoy that. So let's just get all of high school schoolwork done in 1 year. So I remember one day we like
I don't
for
know
a
if I
couple
got
months
it.
of what?
I don't know if I managed to do it in 1 year.
I
so
remember
think
I
you
did.
Of course you did.
I didn't.
So I basically did all of my high school necessity knowledge in 1 year, and we went to Europe so we could enjoy our time. But after Europe, I was basically like, okay, now what? So in Europe, my mom and I actually started our blog together, which is now our business. But basically what happens is that even if you have a large schedule of schoolwork to do, you still have so much time in your life, and then you truthfully have to just fill it with something. So basically, you naturally have intrinsic motivation just because you have so much time. You have to fill your life with something, and it's a good thing because the natural tendency for our human mind is to want to create and have ideas, and all of a sudden you have a desire to go consume knowledge and create things.
Yeah. It took me a few years to catch along with this whole intrinsic motivation thing. I remember when
You were 10. You were 10.
I was 10 years old,
You were
to be
10.
fair. Oh my god, I didn't have intrinsic motivation at 10 years old. I'm so terrible. But yeah, they were working on the blog, and I'm like, I just want to draw, whatever. But a few years later, when I became to be her age, and I was 15, I was finally like, oh my gosh, I have all this free time to do anything. And so that kind of started my entrepreneurial side of starting off as a VA, and which eventually led over time to me now trying to be a mindfulness coach. Being a mindfulness coach. So now that, because you have so much time in your day, I was like, you can literally do anything you want. And that's the thing I feel like with school, is that it's a time suck that tries to keep you like, all the things you could do in high school could be done in a year.
Exactly.
And like, so you realize how much time you have. And
So it leads to the next one is creativity, and you have time in your life to be creative. And like I just said, the mind's natural tendency is to want to create things, but you have to have time in your life, and you have to get away from this. You have to basically dive into more of your subconscious space, and the subconscious space is accessed when we're no longer consciously thinking. Now, if you've ever meditated, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but this naturally happens without meditating if you just spend enough time doing nothing.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, like there's so many hours of road tripping. I'll make this quick because I interrupted you again. I know.
I should be more assertive.
You're getting a good glimpse into our natural dynamics here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very much a great example of our natural dynamics. Anyway, like she said, there's so much free time. Like nature, being out, RV life puts you so much more in nature. Now, that's unless you're living RV life just in your still same day-to-day routine, but it gives you so much space to like be in nature, and that quietness there is like really makes so much space for creativity, and it's crazy the difference.
Yeah, and it just makes sense. I think it's probably a little hard to believe, like really all of these things, just if I throw my kids in a motorhome. But when your kids go to school and then they come home after doing whatever sport they do, and then they do their homework, they're not going to spend their hour of free time with their little bit of energy doing anything but binging something on Netflix.
Yeah.
But if you have 8 hours every day, if you have your whole day and you're away from people, and that's another thing, is that creativity doesn't really blossom unless you're by yourself, listening to yourself, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. Like, I mean, if you think about, I remember the first time I kind of noticed my creativity happening was like, we were on, you know, when you're driving, you have a long period of time to sit and think, especially if you're like not watching movies. I mean, watching movies or Netflix gets boring after a while, and you just have to sit and stare out the window, and that's where it happens, where you realize, oh wow, I'm thinking of ideas.
I think
an idea.
I think most of our best ideas,
Happen
each
on
of
the
us,
road.
happen when you're on the highway at night, or even in the day.
Yeah.
But it's a really long stretch of highway in which
And it's
there's
just
nothing. The car's going straight, and
Yeah.
your mind just wanders.
Yeah, and I would even go a step further, because now me and Isabelle do courses on with our mom on helping people understand the chakras so that they can apply them to their own life and feel more empowered. And so literally being in nature has certain colors in nature, like forests have the frequency of the heart chakra, and certain water has the frequency of the sacral chakra, and the sacral chakra is associated with our creativity. So literally the energetic frequencies that are found in nature spark the energy centers within us that allow us to be creative and have vision and intuition and love and compassion. So basically it's just awesome.
so basically it's just awesome. Well, that was a great way to sum up an awesome
We're basically
sentence.
just awesome.
Mic drop.
Okay, number 9 and the final one.
Warning. You might find your true self.
Dun dun dun.
And your true self is basically when you're most alive, like how people see you, how you see yourself, and what's the third one?
Oh yeah, I
And
don't know that
how the
one.
world sees you is, they're all three of those images are the closest
They can
aligned.
get, yeah.
And I
Because
think that's it.
Basically, you know, if you go to school, what happens is you're a kid and you're your total self. You know, you don't care what people think of you, and then
But then
you
you
go
start
to
to mimic
then
people.
middle school happens, and then you go to high
then-
school, and all of a sudden you're trying so hard to be validated. And you know, when we talk about chakras a lot, we talk about how there's the root chakra is the first chakra, the sacral chakra is the second chakra, and the sacral chakra develops when you are in your early teen years. So, and the sacral chakra is the chakra of validation and self-worth. So it's a natural tendency. It's not weird that people in high school, or when you're in high school, you're like, I just want to be validated and have self-worth
It's a natural
through.
response.
It's a
but
natural
you gotta
response.
get past it.
And so what happens is that you basically end up changing yourself, or you put on this identity in order to be accepted into a group. Well,
Yeah.
that completely throws off your alignment with your true sense of self and your natural expression of who you are.
And so when you're in that, for most teenagers, when you're in the high school setting and you're surrounded by peers, you're always naturally in that state, like, okay, how can I be accepted? But when you're RV life, you see that
like,
so much
well,
less that you're like,
Exactly.
I have no choice but to find
Yeah,
acceptance
you're like,
within.
why do I care what you think of me? I'm just gonna act like I normally would.
Exactly. And so, and again, it comes back to nature. You're just spending enough time outdoors. There's no one there to judge you. And then if you have the positive influence of adults, well-adjusted adults
you
are
go.
not going to judge. That's the word. Well-adjusted adults
Yeah.
are not going to judge you for who you
Granted,
yeah.
there's not everyone is a well-adjusted adult.
are.
Yeah.
That's why I said that.
That's why, I mean, that was mind-blowing. I remember for me, as exaggerated as it sounds, that when I started living RV life and seeing more adults out from this society peer group, I was like, whoa, this person's like seeing me and like treating
Right.
me like an adult, and I feel mature talking to you, not
Yes.
like, how are you judging me? I'm so scared.
So those are the 9 things that no one tells you about RV living with teens. I hope that like inspired you and like gave you insight into like the concerns people have about like, I don't know if I can live in an RV with my teenager, or my teenager doesn't want to live in an RV.
And don't worry, like you're probably worried, like, well, I don't want my teen to grow up and be upset at me for something I did when raising them. Don't worry, apparently it happens to everyone.
Yeah, but overall, in case like this sounded like mixed signals that maybe you should or shouldn't live RV life with your teen, it's 100% yes. There's gonna be
Whoever you
moments where your kid's like, oh, this sucks, but like overall, RV life teaches you what really matters and really clears away any mindless chatter that was.
And like those first 3 things we talked about, I think those are like so important in developing a lack of entitlement, because
Mhm.
I mean, sure, we probably entitled in some ways. I'll like fully admit to that, but like
Teaches you overall, like, it really puts life into perspective for teens, and it helps them so much going forward.
So don't forget to like this video and subscribe, and I'm going to put links to all the related blogs we have on the 10 reasons that you shouldn't full-time travel with teenagers, totally sarcastic, and some other RV living resources. You should also check out my mom and dad's other videos on tips for living in an RV and why it's awesome, and other self-limiting beliefs that get in the way. You can also subscribe to each of our own email lists. I have my Consciousness Club, she has the Keep It Mindful Kids Club, and Danny does short story fiction writing.
Any last words?
Good luck.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Oh, shop merch link in bio.